One American town on this list literally bought a dead body to save its economy. Another refuses to install a single traffic light because the streets are too twisted for logic. We live in a world where your refrigerator needs a software update and coffee costs $5, but across the United States, there are pockets of resistance. These aren't movie sets or theme parks. They are real communities where the architecture hasn't changed since the Civil War. We are counting down 10 U.S. towns that looked at the 21st century and said, no thanks. From a desert outpost where a fake Prada store is considered high art, to a river city drowning in Victorian stained glass, to a gritty gulch that still smells like gunpowder and whiskey. These places offer cheap houses and beautiful views, but they come with a catch. You have to survive without the convenience of modern chaos. Like this video if you are tired of living in a gray corporate box. Subscribe so you do not end up buying a condo in the metaverse. Let's take a trip back in time. At number 10, Galena, Illinois. If you think Illinois is nothing but flat cornfields and deep dish pizza, Galena is here to prove you wrong, mostly about the flat part. Tucked away in the northwest corner of the state, this town is so aggressively vintage that walking down Main Street feels less like a vacation and more like you've stumbled onto a high-budget movie set where the director shouted, "Cut," in 1858 and everyone just stayed in character. We aren't talking about a few old buildings. We are talking about a place where 85% of the town is on the National Register of Historic Places. This place was booming back when lead mining meant something, when steamboats crowded the river, and when generals were just guys with questionable facial hair. Time didn't stop here. It simply slowed down. It smells like river water, old brick, and the distinct aroma of tourists buying artisanal fudge. The twist here is that Galena was once bigger than Chicago, but today it is a time capsule where the biggest traffic jam involves a horse-drawn trolley. With a population of just 3,200 souls, the silence is mostly broken by the sound of shutters clicking. If you want to own a piece of this Victorian fever dream, the median home price sits around $310,000, which is surprisingly affordable for a place where Ulysses S. Grant might have been your neighbor. Crime is virtually non-existent, unless you count pricing antique rocking chairs at $500 as a robbery. The economy is entirely fueled by nostalgia and weekend tourism, so unless you can churn butter or sell tickets to a ghost tour, the job market is slim. It is safe, beautiful, and slightly claustrophobic. Would you be willing to live in a town where the grocery store is modern, but your house has original drafty windows from the Civil War? Yes or no? If that feels a bit too Midwestern for you, let's head south to a place that trades bricks for winding limestone streets. At number 9, Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Eureka Springs feels like a town that was built by accident, and then everyone agreed not to fix it. The streets twist and climb like they were designed by someone who hated straight lines and loved drama. Sidewalks vanish without warning. Staircases appear where roads probably should have been. And there are no traffic lights, not one, just polite confusion, slow turns, and the mutual understanding that nobody's in charge here. The buildings lean into the hills wearing Victorian dresses they never took off. Turrets, balconies, ornate trim, all of it stacked impossibly close together, as if the town whispered, "We'll figure it out later," and never did. Time doesn't move forward here. It circles. Everyday life looks slightly theatrical. Artists haul canvases down narrow stairways. Locals chat from porches that hover above the street. Coffee shops feel more like living rooms someone forgot to clean up for guests. There's incense. There's folk music. There's always at least one person who seems to be spiritually between chapters. Eureka Springs has a population of roughly 2,000 people, yet somehow hosts far more personalities than that. Home prices vary wildly. Modest cottages tucked into the hills sit alongside lovingly restored Victorians that cost what you'd expect for something with that much personality. Renting exists, but availability can feel like a scavenger hunt. Work here leans toward tourism, art, hospitality, wellness, and remote jobs quietly happening behind lace curtains. Crime is low, mostly because everyone knows everyone, or at least knows someone who knows you. The cost of living stays manageable, assuming you're not constantly redecorating your house to match your spiritual awakening. This town is perfect for creatives, gentle eccentrics, old souls, and people who enjoy being a little bit different without having to explain it constantly. It's ideal if you like conversations that start strange and end stranger, but if you crave predictability, wide roads, or the comfort of modern sameness, this place may feel like it's messing with you on purpose. At number 8. Deadwood, South Dakota. If Eureka Springs was a hallucinogenic dream, Deadwood, South Dakota, is a punch in the gut followed by a shot of cheap whiskey, a place where the air itself seems to smell of sawdust, gunpowder, and the desperate sweat of men chasing a fortune they will never find. Wooden facades line the street like they're still waiting for a gunfight to break out at noon. Saloons lean against one another, not out of weakness, but familiarity. The Black Hills rise around it like silent witnesses who have seen everything and judged most of it. Deadwood feels frozen somewhere between legend and bad decisions. The Old West never really left. It just cleaned itself up enough to sell souvenirs. Walk down Main Street and you'll hear boots on wooden boards, laughter spilling out of bars that have been serving drinks since the 1800s, and tour guides telling stories that sound exaggerated until you remember where you are. History here isn't behind glass. It's loud, messy, and still a little drunk. Everyday life is a strange mix of locals running errands and visitors chasing a version of the past that may or may not have existed. There are casinos tucked inside historic buildings, cafes serving breakfast to people who stayed out too late, and shops selling everything from fudge to revolvers you definitely shouldn't use. Deadwood's population sits just over 1,000 people, which somehow supports a town that feels much busier than it actually is. If you are thinking about staking your claim here, you might be surprised to find that living in a cowboy legend is not cheap. The median home price has climbed to roughly $375,000, which is a steep price to pay for a house that might be built on top of an abandoned mine shaft and requires a four-wheel drive to reach in the winter. Jobs revolve around tourism, hospitality, gaming, and seasonal work, with a few locals holding everything together behind the scenes. Crime exists, but it's mostly the mild, predictable kind that comes with crowds and late nights. Cost of living is manageable if you're employed year-round and don't mind sharing your town with strangers who think they're cowboys for a weekend. Deadwood is perfect for people who love history with rough edges. For those who don't mind noise, stories that repeat, and living in a place that leans fully into what it is. No apologies, no rebranding. But if you want peace, privacy, or a life untouched by tourism, this town will wear you out fast. So tell me, can you live inside a legend that never shuts up? Or would you rather read about it from somewhere quieter? At number 7, Marfa, Texas. If Deadwood was a shot of whiskey, Marfa, Texas, is a glass of lukewarm water placed on a white pedestal and titled The Void. You drive for hours through flat, dusty nothingness, questioning your life choices, and then, there it is. Low buildings, endless sky, a silence so complete it feels intentional. Marfa doesn't greet you. It observes you, quietly, from across the desert. This place didn't freeze in time the way other towns did. It stepped sideways. Everyday life here feels oddly minimal. Streets are wide and mostly empty. The grocery store closes early. People nod instead of waving. Art installations sit in open fields like they're waiting for someone to ask the right question. And somehow, modern life exists here only as an idea, a concept, not a requirement. There's no rush because there's nowhere to rush to. Coffee happens slowly. Conversations drift. Nights are dark in a way cities forgot was possible. When something happens in Marfa, everyone knows about it, mostly because nothing usually does. With a population of roughly 1,600 people, the town is so quiet you can practically hear your own skin tanning in the relentless sun. But do not let the visual desolation fool you into thinking this is a bargain bin ghost town. The median home price has skyrocketed to around $450,000, fueled by coastal millionaires who want a vacation home where the main activity is staring at a concrete box in a field. Jobs are scarce unless you bring one with you. Art, hospitality, small businesses, and remote work keep the town functioning. Crime is low, mostly because there's nowhere to hide and not much reason to try. The cost of living feels reasonable until you remember how far you are from everything else. Marfa is perfect for people who want space, mental, physical, and emotional, for creatives who need silence more than stimulation, for anyone tired of being told what a normal life should look like. But if you need convenience, variety, or the comfort of knowing exactly what tomorrow looks like, this town might feel like a beautiful mistake. So be honest. Could you live somewhere this quiet? Or would the emptiness start feeling a little too loud? At number 6, Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. If Marfa was an exercise in emptiness, Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, is an exercise in cramming as much Victorian Gothic architecture as possible into a shoebox. They call it the Switzerland of America, which is a remarkably bold claim for a town sitting in the middle of the Poconos. But once you see the fog clinging to the steep forested hills and the clay-red roofs peeking through the mist, you actually start to believe the hype. It smells of damp pine needles, river mud, and the heavy, oily smoke of the vintage steam engines that still chug through the valley, their whistles echoing off the canyon walls like a ghost refusing to leave. The vibe here is not just old, it is a specific flavor of mid-century family vacation nostalgia mixed with 19th-century coal baron opulence, a place where it feels like you should be wearing a wool coat and carrying a suitcase with no wheels. But the twist here is one of the most bizarre branding exercises in American history. The town was originally called Mauch-Chunk, but in 1954, the residents literally acquired the remains of Olympic legend Jim Thorpe, a man who had never set foot in the town while he was alive, buried him there, and renamed the entire city after him just to generate tourism. It is a level of marketing desperation that is so audacious, you almost have to respect it. Jobs center around tourism, outdoor recreation, local services, and remote work, quietly happening behind lace curtains and second-floor windows. Crime is low, mostly limited to minor issues that come with visitors. Cost of living is moderate, especially if you're not trying to turn your life into a weekend getaway business. This town is perfect for people who love seasons, history, and a sense of routine that feels comforting instead of confining. For those who romanticize train whistles, fall leaves, and evenings that end early, on purpose. But if you need constant novelty, late nights, or the feeling that everything is brand new, Jim Thorpe may feel like it's already told its best stories. With a population of roughly 4,600 people, the town feels intimate, or perhaps inescapable, depending on how much you like your neighbors. The streets are so narrow, steep, and winding that modern delivery trucks look like panicked animals trapped in a maze, and finding a parking spot is a competitive sport that ruins friendships. If you want to buy into this moody, mountainous time warp, the median home price is a surprisingly reasonable $270,000, though you will likely spend the savings on repairing slate roofs and trying to heat a house built before the concept of insulation was invented. At number 5. Beaufort, South Carolina. Beaufort is a slow, humid drift into a nap you might never wake up from. This isn't just the South. This is the Low Country, a place where the air is so thick with moisture and jasmine scent that you do not breathe it. You practically drink it. Walking the streets here feels like stepping directly into a cinema screen, which makes sense because everything from Forrest Gump to The Big Chill was filmed here, and honestly, the town hasn't changed much since the credits rolled. The vibe is aggressively picturesque. We are talking about antebellum mansions with porches wide enough to land a helicopter on, shaded by massive live oaks dripping with Spanish moss that looks like the tattered beards of ancient wizards. It is beautiful, sure, but it is also a place where time doesn't just slow down, it sits on a rocking chair and refuses to get up. The twist here is the militant preservation. The town is so committed to its aesthetic that painting your front door the wrong shade of white could probably trigger a town council tribunal. With a population of around 13,600 people, it is large enough to have a pulse, but small enough that everyone knows exactly whose dog ruined their azaleas. If you want to sip sweet tea on one of those famous verandas, the median home price is hovering around $390,000, which is the price you pay for living inside a postcard. Jobs lean toward healthcare, education, tourism, marine-related work, and remote careers that don't mind a little humidity. Crime is low, the kind that barely interrupts conversation. Cost of living is reasonable for a coastal town, especially if you're comfortable trading nightlife for quiet evenings and early mornings. Beaufort is perfect for people who crave calm. For retirees, writers, slow walkers, and anyone who believes a front porch is not optional. It's for those who like their days warm, their neighbors familiar, and their lives unhurried. But if you need constant stimulation, late-night energy, or the feeling that something exciting might happen at any second, Beaufort will gently bore you to tears. So tell me, could you live somewhere that asks you to slow down every single day? Or would you start itching for noise, lights, and chaos? At number 4, Port Townsend, Washington. If Beaufort was a Southern belle sipping tea, Port Townsend, Washington, is an eccentric sea captain who refuses to admit the 19th century ended. Perched on the tip of the Olympic Peninsula, this town is what happens when you take a pristine Victorian city and leave it out in the rain for 100 years. It smells of salt spray, wet wool, and the distinct sawdust aroma of expensive wooden boats. The vibe here is steampunk retirement community, where the downtown is filled with massive, ornate stone buildings that look far too grand for a town of its size. That is actually the twist. In the 1800s, Port Townsend was convinced it was going to be the New York of the West, so investors poured millions into building a metropolis, only for the railroad to cancel the contract at the last minute, causing the economy to crash so hard the town was instantly frozen in time. Today, with a population of just 10,000 people, it feels like a movie set inhabited by shipwrights, artists, and deer, urban deer that wander the streets with the entitlement of city council members. Jobs focus on maritime work, tourism, arts, education, healthcare, and remote careers that appreciate a good foggy morning. Crime is low, the kind that barely makes the local news. Cost of living is higher than you'd expect for a small town, but many residents will tell you that the trade-off is worth it, and then gesture broadly at the water. This town is perfect for people who value beauty over convenience, for sailors, artists, readers, and anyone who believes a town should have a personality, not a brand strategy. But if you want speed, constant development, or endless options delivered to your door, Port Townsend might feel like it's politely refusing to keep up. At number 3, Winona, Minnesota. Winona feels like a town that never tried to impress anyone, and somehow ended up charming anyway. It stretches quietly along the Mississippi River, with old houses climbing the bluffs and brick buildings holding their ground downtown. Nothing here is flashy, nothing is rushed. The river moves slowly, the streets feel familiar after a single walk, and the town seems perfectly comfortable being exactly what it is. Time here doesn't freeze, it drifts. Everyday life is built around routines that haven't changed much in decades. Morning coffee from a local cafe where they already know your order, a walk along the river, students mixing with lifelong locals, bookstores, bakeries, music drifting out of second-story windows. Even the newer places feel like they're trying not to stand out too much. Winona has a population of around 25,000 people, which makes it feel alive without feeling crowded. Housing is a mix of older homes, Riverview properties, and modest neighborhoods that still believe in front yards. Prices stay reasonable compared to larger cities, especially if you're willing to trade new construction for solid bones and history. Renting is widely available thanks to colleges in town, but long-term options still exist if you're patient. Jobs revolve around education, healthcare, manufacturing, local businesses, and remote work that appreciates a quiet backdrop. Crime is low, mostly small-town predictable. Cost of living stays comfortably below big city levels, which is part of why people who leave often find themselves quietly coming back. Winona is perfect for people who want balance, enough life to feel connected, enough calm to breathe. It's for those who like community without obligation, culture without noise, and progress that doesn't bulldoze what came before. But if you're chasing nonstop excitement, constant reinvention, or a skyline that changes every year, Winona may feel a little too content for your taste. At number 2, New Harmony, Indiana. If Winona was a bustling river town, New Harmony, Indiana is the quiet, intellectual cousin who stares at you until you feel uncomfortable. Located in the southwest corner of the state, this isn't just a town. It is the site of 2 failed attempts at creating a utopia on Earth, and you can still feel the lingering disappointment in the air. It smells of old boxwood hedges, damp earth, and the dusty pages of philosophy books. The vibe is aggressively peaceful, with a layout so orderly it feels like it was designed by a mathematician with OCD. You have log cabins sitting next to avant-garde modern architecture, including a church without a roof, which seems like a bold choice for the rainy Midwest. The twist here is that this tiny village was once the scientific center of America, known as the Athens of the West, where a literal boatload of knowledge arrived to solve all of humanity's problems. Spoiler alert, they didn't. With a population of just nearly 700 people, it is so quiet that a car backfiring counts as a major news event. If you want to live in this monument to high ideals, the median home price is an approachable $220,000, but you are buying into a town that functions more like a museum than a municipality. Jobs are few and far between, unless you bring one with you. Education, tourism, local institutions, and remote work keep things functioning. Crime is almost non-existent, mostly because the idea of causing trouble here feels socially inappropriate. Cost of living is low, but so is stimulation, and that's the trade. New Harmony is perfect for thinkers, for writers, philosophers, introverts, and anyone who feels overstimulated by the modern world. It's for people who don't need much, just space, quiet, and a sense that their surroundings have meaning. But if you thrive on energy, spontaneity, or a packed calendar, this town might feel less like peace and more like absence. So let me ask, could you live somewhere this intentionally quiet? Or would the stillness start to feel like pressure? At number 1, Nevada City, California. If hearing Nevada City makes you picture neon lights and the sound of slot machines, you have the wrong state and the wrong century. Tucked away in the Sierra Nevada foothills of California, this town looks like the gold rush never ended, and the miners just went on a lunch break in 1859 and forgot to come back. It smells of old pine, sun-baked wood, and the faint aroma of money that turned into history long ago. The vibe isn't just retro, it is genuine Victorian Wild West, with wooden facades and narrow streets that wind through the hills so chaotically that a modern SUV looks like a spaceship that crash-landed in a period drama. The twist here is that this isn't Disneyland or a tourist trap staffed by actors. It is a functioning town where the saloon buildings now sell craft beer and organic soap, but the floorboards still creak exactly like they did 150 years ago. With a population of just over 3,000 people, privacy is a relative concept, and the silence is usually only broken by an acoustic guitar from a local pub. However, buying into this living authenticity comes with a price tag that will take your breath away faster than the uphill walk. The median home price here sits at a painful $650,000. Essentially, you are paying over $500,000 for the privilege of living in a house that has seen more shootouts than you have seen action movies. The economy runs on tourism, the arts, and tech refugees fleeing San Francisco, so finding a normal job here is harder than panning for a gold nugget in the local creek. Crime is low, mostly because there is nothing to steal but antiques, and trying to make a getaway on those winding mountain roads is a logistical nightmare. It is beautiful, expensive, and incredibly cinematic. So tell me, are you ready to live in a town where history costs more than modern luxury, and your neighbor might be the ghost of an old prospector? Yes or no? Jobs center around tourism, arts, small businesses, education, and remote work that tolerates occasional power outages and strong opinions about local issues. Crime is low, mostly minor, and quickly discussed by everyone. Cost of living is elevated compared to other towns on this list, but many residents see that as the price of admission. Nevada City is perfect for people who want history without kitsch, for creatives, performers, forest lovers, and those who believe a town should feel earned, not manufactured. It's for people who like living somewhere that remembers itself. But if you want polish, predictability, or brand new everything, this town may feel inconvenient, opinionated, and slightly unimpressed with you. So there you have it, a cross-country tour of the places where America hit the pause button and refused to let go. We have seen towns that trade modern convenience for Victorian charm, and places where the cost of living includes dealing with ghosts, humidity, or a severe lack of parking spaces. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Which one of these time capsules would you actually pack your bags for, and which one would send you running back to the nearest Starbucks after just 1 week? Drop your answer down there, hit that like button if you appreciate, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss our next adventure.